Here's a question I get all the time. What is RAW and should I be shooting RAW? We're going to get into that this week on 3 Minute Thursday. Hi, I'm Gene. Welcome back to my channel. I'm glad you're back. Today we're going to talk about RAW versus JPEG. Now this is actually kind of a touchy subject, and I didn't realize how touchy until I started researching a little bit, just double checking my facts. And yeah, there have been a couple of different schools of thought on this. And from what I've been able to determine, the reasons for shooting RAW instead of JPEG are becoming fewer and fewer as technology gets better and better. I think that's the reality. Before I explain RAW, let me just talk a little bit about what we're used to seeing. So a camera right out of the box, what you're normally shooting with your smartphone, with your regular point and shoot camera, with any camera on its default settings, is a JPEG image. JPEG stands for Joint Photographic Group. It was created to standardize the way photographs are compressed so that they could be shared easily. So basically the way a JPEG works is it takes the image that you created on the screen and it's slicing that off the top and it's saving that and all the information that it needed to get to that picture. Anything that is not used to create that picture is then deleted and thrown out. And so you lose all that information when you create a JPEG image. Sensors and cameras nowadays are capable of gathering so much more information. And that's why many photographers shoot in a RAW format, because all that information is retained in the file when you carry it over into your editing software. So there are several pros and cons to shooting JPEG or shooting RAW. When you shoot JPEG, you definitely have a smaller file size, so if space is an issue, JPEG files are much smaller. I took a couple of sample images, and as you can see, the JPEG files are much smaller than the RAW files. They are much easier to share, so if you just want to take some quick photographs and you want to send them out to friends and family, upload them on Facebook, email them to somebody, you can do that very easily with a JPEG. Some of the cons to JPEGs is that you do have a limited amount of editing that you can do to an image. For example, if you need to save an image because you got the white balance wrong, you didn't get the right color, you want to do something artistically with the image, the JPEG will break apart much faster. And you do lose the information. So if you want to go back and do something with the image later, you basically are stuck with the image that you took, and you have very little information to bring anything back. For example, details and shadows and highlights and things like that. So to explain a RAW image is basically everything that your sensor picks up, even stuff that you can't see with the naked eye. Your sensor is picking up and it's saving it and it's putting it all into a RAW file. On Nikons, that file is a .nef file. It's different for different camera manufacturers. Pros to shooting RAW is when you import these files into Lightroom, you have endless possibilities for editing. You can bring a lot more detail back in the shadows. You can make adjustments to your white balance. You can do a lot more creatively with your image when you shoot it in RAW. The other thing I like about shooting RAW is it kind of future-proofs your archive. So for example, as editing software becomes more advanced and as your skills become more advanced, sometimes it's fun, and I do this all the time, to go back and look at a picture that you took a long time ago and bring it back with all the information that was captured at the time and edit it with your new skills and see what you can get out of it that you might not have been able to get back when you took the picture originally. Had you shot a JPEG, it would have been much more difficult to go back and pull that image and do something more creative with it. Some of the cons to RAW, of course, is that you do have much larger file sizes and they must be processed. You can't just take a RAW picture and then send it to somebody via email. They won't be able to open it unless they have Lightroom or Photoshop or some other RAW photo editor. One of the big differences between JPEG and RAW is the number of colors that are retained within the image. So basically, without boring you with a bunch of math, JPEG is typically an 8-bit compression algorithm. And what that means is that there are 16 million color combinations. Now that sounds like a lot, but consider the fact that A typical camera shoots in RAW at 12-bit, and my Nikon D600 shoots at 14-bit. And at 14-bit color depth, you have over 4 billion colors. Now, why is that important? Okay, so if you are going to do any extreme editing, if you're going to bring up highlights and shadows, and you're going to be blowing these pictures up really big so that you can see every little pixel and all this, you'll start to see some color banding. Depending on how this looks on YouTube, for example, even with video, sometimes on my gradient back here behind me, you can see some color banding. I don't see that here in the studio, and I don't see it on my video when I put it out, but sometimes YouTube will compress videos down where they take some of that bit depth out, and you lose some of those color choices, which causes that gradient. So it goes from one color to the next color to the next color because there's no colors in between for it to choose from. By having more colors to choose from, you can do more creatively, and the bit depth also improves the dynamic range, which is your ability to capture details in the highlights and the shadows when you're taking a RAW photo. This is lost when you take a JPEG image. What I like about taking RAW photos is that I have complete control over how the image is going to end up when I export the image. So if you're shooting professionally, if you're an extreme hobbyist, if you're really serious about photography, I definitely think that you should be shooting RAW. If you're not comfortable editing RAW images, one of the things that I would recommend is actually shooting both RAW and JPEG at the same time. Many of the newer cameras, the Nikons and the Canons, I know for sure, are able to shoot both JPEG and RAW at the same time. The cool thing about shooting JPEG and RAW is that the JPEGs get you to where you are trying to get very quickly. You've got your pictures, you can take them and do whatever you need to with them. But you have the RAW photos so that down the line, when you do get an editing software, or when you learn a new skill, you can go back and find those RAW images and really create something special. I gotta wet the whistle. If you don't have one of these cool camera lens mugs, link in the description. Okay, let's jump into Lightroom real quick. So what I have here is an image that was taken. I intentionally set the white balance completely off. It's actually, I think, set on fluorescent and like fluorescent light. And so since it was shot outside, the white balance is completely off. This is the JPEG and this is the RAW. And you'll see down here in the bottom, this is the NEF file format, which is from the Nikon. Now, if I could direct your attention over to the white balance section here on the right hand side, what you're going to notice on the RAW image, it defaults to as shot, and when I pull this down, I have all the same options that I have in my camera. I can change it to flash, fluorescent, tungsten, shade, cloudy, daylight, auto. Okay, I'm going to change this to daylight, and it immediately changes to what I was seeing with my naked eye, and that's why white balance is so important. Going back to the JPEG image, if I come back over to the same selection, I have as shot, auto, and custom. So I have fewer options on a JPEG to adjust the white balance. Once you set the white balance in the camera and take the photograph, you're pretty much stuck with that white balance. Now you can do some things here to create a close enough white balance, but you're always going to be a little bit off because you didn't get it right in camera. And with the RAW image, that information is still there. And with JPEG, it's not. So I can go to custom, I can go to auto, and auto will do a pretty good job, okay? But you can see the difference when I go to auto. The greens are a little bit washed out. When I go to RAW, I've got a much richer color depth. So that's just one example of how you can retain a lot more information by shooting RAW. Now, obviously I can go to the JPEG and I can bump up the saturation and the contrast, and I can do a lot of things to try to get to that, but the more that I do to a JPEG image, the more I'm going to break that image and it's going to look like it's been processed. I don't have to do that with this RAW image. It's already good from a white balance and a color saturation perspective. All I need to do is put my little fine touches on it and deliver it. So To answer the question, should you be shooting RAW, you really have to ask yourself a couple of questions. What are you shooting for? Someone said it great when they said, do you really need 4 billion colors to show the color of ketchup on your child's hot dog at your family barbecue in your backyard? Probably not. Most cameras can change back and forth between RAW and JPEG so quickly that it kind of makes sense to shoot JPEG on a normal everyday basis when you're just shooting pictures for your family photo album. But when you're out shooting for a job, when you're out shooting landscape, when you're shooting something where you want to be artistic, I recommend going RAW. What do you think of this new microphone? This is the legendary live broadcast microphone, and man, it picks up everything. So this might be interesting in post-edit. Listen to this. Right? If you're doing anything professional, if you're doing anything artistic, I definitely recommend shooting RAW and editing your photos in an editing program such as Adobe Lightroom. If you're interested in how to get Adobe Lightroom for less than the cost of 2 coffees a month, I did a video on that, which you can see right here. I hope you got something out of this video. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button. That helps me a great deal. If you're interested in more content like this, please subscribe. I'd love to have you back to the channel. And if you've got an idea of something you'd like me to do a video about, be sure to leave a comment. I try to answer all comments and get great ideas in the comments for videos and my DMs on Instagram. You can follow me at Gene Sizemore on Instagram as well. And that's my video. I'll see you next week.